Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, Canammissing Project, another copyrighted edition for our video channel. Luckily, still here. And YouTube is still doing their investigation. I hope you can see me, and if you can, I guess that's good news. I'm still looking for a platform to put my videos on. Again, it's going to have to be a platform where I can monetize this. I don't want to have to charge you, but that they monetize it for me, putting ads on. Again, it may have to be something where I charge. I don't want to go that direction because I know that excludes some of you. I don't know how else to do it. But finding a channel where they can monetize it, I own the content, and I'm not restricted in my speech. Finding a channel that has all three of that criteria, I haven't been able to find it yet. So, still looking. So, I've talked to you before about Australia and how I see so many parallels between our country and theirs. Missing person-wise, UFO-wise, strange things in the woods-wise. There's a lot of parallels between that country and ours. And I view those people out there as our cousins and our brothers and sisters. And I've been there, and they're some of the nicest people I've ever met. Now, to that end, this month, I've talked about this magazine before. One of my favorite magazines in the world. It's produced by Duncan Rhodes. Duncan, great guy and super smart. And he puts out things that you're not going to see on mainstream media, which is why I read it. And he has experts come in and talk. And this month, he talked about a series of experts that are getting throttled and stymied, and their voices cannot be heard about a variety of topics in our world. And one of the more interesting, they're all interesting, but one of the more interesting people that's getting throttled and can't talk is a man named Dr. Michael Yeadon, Y-E-A-D-O-N. Friends, he was the chief science officer at Pfizer. You may want to hear what he has to say. Now, when we have somebody from inside of a company that leaves and becomes a whistleblower, those are the kind of people you want to hear from, because you want to hear about what's going on. How does that company think? How safe is their products, etc. Well, Duncan does a good job of explaining how this person is being quieted. The other day, another friend gave me a topic to research. And initially I went to Google and I just went through the first 3 pages, and I thought, wow, this is a big topic. I can't find anything. Went to Yahoo, couldn't find anything. Went to a site called Duck, like D-U-C-K, go. Duckduckgo. And gee, it's in one of the top 3 search parameters. The moral to the story is, you are being restricted as to what you can see. And this is a comprehensive approach. It's not just a mainstream media. It's also some of the big tech companies are doing it as well. So Duckduckgo does not record and does not track your web searches. An important point. And a couple weeks ago this happened to me, and since then I've just been using DuckDuckGo for almost everything. And it's been very successful very quickly in coming up with the things I want to read. So I think that I'm probably going to move all my searches to there. And I would encourage you to do that too. Because if you search for something on Google and right away you can't find it, you'll get frustrated and move away from it. You won't look into it. Or you'll think it's not a real deal, it must be fake. No, not true. So the Nexus magazine this month was really good. I would encourage, Duncan pays me nothing to do this. I don't get anything. I wouldn't ask for anything. He's doing a great job, and it's distributed worldwide. I would encourage you to get it. Nexus, Nexus. Also this month, MUFON, another magazine I subscribe to, the MUFON newsletter, came out with their monthly statistics. And I think they're interesting. So this is where, for UFO sightings, and this is the number of sightings that came in from each of these countries. And here's the top 5. USA had 426, UK had 30, Canada had 14, France 12, Australia 9. Well, what is interesting is 4 out of the 5 countries that were mentioned are 4 out of the top 5 for missing people I've written about. It's quite a coincidence. And the states that had the most reported UFO standings in order was California, Florida, Texas, Colorado, Arizona, New York, and Missouri. Top 3, I understand, this California, Florida, and Texas. Gee, they're right next to the water. And they're 3 of the more populated states. I do think that, as an example, 14 UFO sightings for Canada in a month seems very, very small. Either people aren't reporting or they don't know where to report. Because I know areas around Vancouver and in the mountains outside of Vancouver where there can be nightly sightings. Fascinating. Now, I know I have some teachers out there that are watching because I hear from you guys, and I appreciate it. I'm one of these people who thinks that our kids need to be back in the classrooms. I think about that for a variety of reasons. Number one reason is their mental health and their ability to learn. I don't think you learn well online. I think they need to be in the classroom and they need to be learning face to face. And part of that maturity process is dealing with social maturity, dealing with each other on a day-to-day basis. And understanding that if you look at the statistics, the risk of young people under 20 to COVID is infinitesimally small, very small. And they need to be in the classroom. I saw just recently that it was a large teachers association said that they want to move to a 4-day week. It's the last thing our kids need. We are, meaning our learning in our high schools is near the bottom of the pack of the most developed countries in the world. And we need to get back to basics: reading, writing, arithmetic, science. We need to get back there quick if we want to compete in the world. Back when I was in human resources and I had a recruiting director that was working for me, we'd have conversations all the time about how he'd want to hire people from the US, but they didn't have the background, they didn't have the intellect. We were hiring people from all over the world that had much better education than some of the US people for engineering jobs. It was sad. It was really sad. The mathematics were bad. Occasionally we'd hire 1 or 2, but it was rare. So I'm a big advocate for education, but I'm also a big advocate for specific education. Getting a degree in art from a university is going to be a tough road to hoe to get a good job. So, let's get right on to the letters. Dave, thank you for your kind reply. I'm honored. Since '62, I've been paying attention, watching, learning, and seeing things unfold step by step, year after year. In doing so, I have found that when attempting to find the correct answer to a certain problem, the challenge is often simply trying to ask the right question. If I could quote a great thinker, Aesthevius, quoting, "In war, the first casualty is truth." End of quotes. One could say that what our country is going through is not really an economic tragedy. It's a tragedy of freedom. I'd like to indulge a little bit on this point. As is commonly known, economic uncertainty, instability, and inflation are some of the main conditions that the Federal Reserve Bank was chartered to help guard our economy against. But when the Federal Reserve Bank actually does things to hasten economic uncertainty, instability, and inflation, coupled with crippling economic policies of the executive branch, how can it not be an engineered economic takedown attempt? Many say, well, they are stupid. They don't know what they are doing. And I don't think so. This cave wall type explanation holds true at all. The individuals at the helm are highly educated and experienced in their fields. And when you look at their backgrounds and track records, light is shed on their intentions, possible intentions. An economic takedown is simply one method to create permanent change in a society. The economics can be rebuilt just like a brick building after it's crumbled. Look at World War II, for example, and how the economies of many countries were rebuilt rather quickly. However, the form of social control, also known as the governing ideology, cannot be changed quickly if the change is schemed to be done peacefully. For a peaceful change to occur, the change must occur over a long period of time in order to gain incremental support from the people. It's no secret that the people of our country have a low pain threshold for economic turmoil and loss. So if the pain level is turned up, people will more likely accept a solution that is presented to them as a fix to the perceived problem. Again, the right question would need to be asked. Will the offered solution possibly usher in a change in governing ideology? Something other than democracy in our country? Doctor, I don't take care. Just give me the damn morphine to stop the pain because I can't take it. The question then becomes, what will be offered as the best solution to a failed economy and possible global economic catastrophe? And what will we have to give up as far as our sovereignty in signing on with that deal? If I could please quote another great thinker, the devil's in the detail, Dave Paulides. Will we have to sign on with the devil? And what do the devils like to do? Great letter, thank you. One thing I want everyone to understand. Let's pretend we have 10 widgets. 10 widgets, and we're all on this island. And there's those widgets are food, water, and vitamins to let you survive. And there's 10 people on the island, and there's 10 widgets, and those widgets are the only thing that you can survive on. And there's 10 people. And each of those people have $1. And you can buy anything you want. Well, guess what they're going to buy? They're going to buy a widget. It's going to cost $1. Now, if we flood that economy with money and we give everybody $100, what does the value of the widget go to? All of a sudden, there's inflation. The widget now goes to $100 a piece. When you pour money into an economy where there's limited availability of items, that causes inflation. That's what we have right now. When our government poured millions of dollars, now trillions of dollars into our system, there's no other way to go but inflation. And when they say, well, we don't know how to solve that, any high school economics teacher could solve it. And I just gave you the 5-cent education on how inflation works. It's just the truth, just the facts. Now, when the administration cut back and made higher requirements on oil drilling, we still have the oil in the ground. We could go right back to being self-sufficient on oil production like we were 2 years ago, we could go right back to that. But the administration cut back and placed higher restrictions on everything. So let's think about this for a second. Let's pretend that a gallon of gas cost $1. And the taxes on that 1 gallon were 30%. So each gallon costs $1.30. Now, let's pretend, because of inflation and because of restrictions on gas, that gallon of gas now costs $5. It could be $2, I don't care, but let's just say $5. Well, at 30%, that means that gallon of gas really is $6.50. Because 30 cents times 5 is $1.50. Add that to the $5, you have $6.50. Now, if you remember back when minimum wage was given an incremental increase, very small increase when the new administration started. And they said that they were going to make for better living conditions. Everybody, I don't care if you're low income or you're high income, you drive a car usually to get to work and you have to commute. Now, getting back to the $1 versus $5 cost of gas. When our government says that they were going to keep prices low, when our government says that they weren't going to make you hurt and they weren't going to raise taxes. Do you remember raising taxes? Folks, wake up. Wake up out there. You're falling asleep. When our gasoline price went up, the taxes went up. In the example I gave you, they went from 30 cents to $1.50. Our government raised taxes, and they're making more money off those higher gas bills. It may not appear to you to say, well, it's a personal income tax increase. No, it's a use tax increase. It's just a different way to take money from your pocket. And if you're a wealthy person, what does it matter? You know, if gas has gone up 40% in the last year, what does it matter? If you're watching your dollars and cents and how your family eats every night, that's a huge raise in cost for that family, 40%. But then you look across the board at so many other things that have gone up in price. Yes, a use tax is a tax. And when gasoline goes up, it affects all modes of transportation. When oil goes up in price, all modes of transportation are affected. Because everything that's made, even if it's electric, uses oil and gas. Next letter. Dear Mr. Paulides, upon your most recent request for strange happenings, I've gotten the courage to write you in hopes I'm not wasting your time. My husband is an avid outdoorsman and a hunter from Texas. He has been in the ministry for the last 10 years. 3 years ago, we moved to a rental property that backs up to a wildlife management area in the mountains of North Georgia. As time goes on and things become more normal, we realize more and more how strange the first year was at our residence. We moved to the home the first week of October 3 years ago, and my husband began hunting almost immediately. He would spend stretches of time in the woods, sometimes up to half a day, 12 hours. Upon returning home, typically after dark, he would always make comments such as, "It was so strange. I didn't hear a thing. I didn't see a thing." One day, as he was mapping out deer and other game trails miles into the woods, he remarked that it was dead silent, beginning about 20 feet behind our home. No birds, no bugs, nothing. He could go 12 hours without seeing or hearing anything. Trail cams would show deer, bear, and hog constantly passing through. My husband does not believe or entertain thoughts of the paranormal, aliens, or Bigfoot. I knew by my racing heart that he recounted that time of total silence when something was not right in the woods. The only animals I remember hearing or seeing were the neighbor's hounds howling nonstop day and night for months after moving in. I figured it was our dogs causing this reaction. A friend came to visit a week or so after moving in, and we took a walk down our gravel road towards the section of the road that crosses the national forest. We both had infants in carriers and slowly walked and talked. The closer we got to this section of the road canopied by woods, the slower we walked, and all of a sudden realized we were both hesitant to go any further. We stopped and heard a very distinct growl and almost ran back home. We both had gut reactions that something was not safe in the woods. Another strange thing that verified how things were off here is that we taught both of our kids sign language beginning at 6 months. Our daughter spent her first half year of life here, and I vividly remember her first signing bird while we were away from home and saw a bird flying overhead. My son, on the other hand, born 2 years after moving here, signed bird almost immediately upon hearing them outside our front porch, which my daughter never did. We have slowly each season noticed more and more arrivals such as birds and squirrels and even mice, rats, snakes, which we never had any signs of before. Not even droppings the first 2 years. One more strange thing is the presence of large military planes flying so low they rattle the entire house at all hours, but with no rhythm or schedule that I've been able to notice. My husband says they are C-130s, but I've never seen one, even though I hear them weekly. I found your channel, and honestly, I've been hooked and consumed your content immediately upon posting. My husband is slowly getting caught up and has come to his own conclusion about what he has experienced, but has never said it out loud. Because of your videos, we have a new system of sharing his location as he hunts, and he gives me a time in which I should call for help if he's not home. Excellent. A PLB is on our list to purchase as well. Good move. And thanks to your information, my children do not play outdoors alone anymore. And when we hike, we are very careful to keep them between us and never let them be last in line. A video with parents would be great and helpful about how to be safe in the outdoors. Thank you for your hard work. Well, I'm glad that somebody's paying attention to the recommendations. One thing I would probably recommend if you have small kids, even if you're in the woods, is put a small whistle in their pocket. And if you guys do get separated, they can blow the whistle, and you can hear that a lot farther than you can a voice. I wouldn't put it around their neck just because kids have a habit of playing games with themselves or grabbing somebody's necklace or something else around their neck, and they could hurt each other, but put it in their pocket. Next letter. Dave, I was hunting alone last week in the Mohawk Valley in upstate New York. It was a typical November day, cold with on and off snow showers. The woods was fairly active that morning, and I saw plenty of deer, but nothing I wanted to harvest. There was also the normal bird and squirrel activity. I was sitting on a down tree about 30 yards in from an open meadow. I suddenly realized that the woods had gotten dead quiet when about 10 yards behind me toward the meadow, a large branch snapped like it had been snapped on by something big. It startled me, and I instantly spun around to see what was there, and there was absolutely nothing. I suddenly had a feeling of instant dread and left for the day. I have no explanation as to what could have broken that branch. As close as it sounded, I would have definitely seen a person or a large animal enough for it to make that noise. I probably hear us, and the reason I read this, I probably hear a story like this once a week, maybe twice a week. It's very common. I remember Survivor Man, Les Stroud, when he and I spent a lot of time together. He would tell me that when he was younger and he'd be in the woods, he would have things around him happen, and he would slough it off as nothing important. And then as he got older and he started to recognize, hey, these aren't normal sounds, these aren't normal happenings, that he started to really pay attention. Here's a guy that spent the majority of his whole life in the woods. So to get him to start paying attention that these things are abnormal is monumental. But I can understand why it's hard to get the general public to. One of the examples that Les talked about was these loud breaks or trees coming down. Not normal. And if they happen near you, is it a message? Who knows? But it's probably something we should pay attention to. Specifically, when you feel that dread. I've heard that hundreds of times from people over the years. When you get that thing in your mind and the hair goes up on the back of your neck and you just know you don't want to be there and you got to leave. So is something imparting that feeling in you? I tend to think it is. Next letter. Dave, hopefully today is finding you well. Thank you for what you do for the larger community and specifically for our village. Hey, our village, it's growing. And I said before, I think we have some of the smartest people around that have come here. It's taken some time for people to understand that this is a dialogue, it's not a monologue. And I want to hear from you, which is what I'm doing right now. And I want the things and the messages that I give you during our talks here to resonate in your mind and to cause you to think. And a lot of people have said, you know, those letters at the beginning really put my mind in gear. I get other letters from people, I don't even want to hear the letters, Dave. They're irrelevant. I don't want to hear about anything like that. Well, maybe you weren't even meant to be on the channel then, because I really need people to think when you're here. I've written to you before after hearing you discuss strange occurrences happening to villagers that are similar to things that I have also experienced. I've also heard you recently mention that there are strange cases of children disappearing from their yards in Pennsylvania, which caught my attention. Again, a significant portion of Missing 411 Eastern U.S. has to do with a time span in Pennsylvania where more young kids disappeared than in any other location, in any other time span I can find anywhere in the world. So yeah, weird. I have a super strange personal experience which happened to me when I was very young in Pennsylvania. I hope this might add to whatever research or investigations you might be involved. I spent most of my early childhood with my grandparents who lived in Boothwyn, Boothwyn, Pennsylvania, one of the many suburbs just south of Philadelphia. The neighborhood at the time was known as Gardendale because of all the streets were named after fruit. My grandparents lived on Plum Street. I don't remember the exact date of the event which I'm about to describe, but it happened around, I think, the summer of '80, just before I turned 5. My grandparents had a rather large garden on that property. Guessing from my memory, probably took up at least a fifth, if not a quarter of the property, maybe around 1,500 square feet. The garden was large enough that my grandfather used a gas-powered tiller to prepare the planting. The front of the property had a large privacy hedge facing Plum Street. If you were standing on the front porch of the house facing the street, the garden was situated on your left side, 315 degrees relative bearing from the notional observer on the porch. The garden was situated in a corner of the property bordered on one side by the neighbor's fence, by the hedge along Plum Street, and fenced on the rest of the property. I wasn't supposed to play in the garden, but I was able to climb the fence to get in there anyway. On the day of the event, I clearly remember sitting in the garden digging in the dirt between the crops. Something hit me on the head while I was playing. It was a small, hard, dark object attached to a filament line, much like a fishing line, that was dangling just a few inches above the ground. The line appeared to have come straight out of the clear sky. There was no visible source whatsoever. But there the line was dangling in front of my face. I witnessed this through the tears from crying after getting hit in the head. It hit hard enough to cause discomfort, but not hard enough to do any severe damage. I had climbed over the fence and ran to my grandmom complaining that something hit me in the head. Her response was that I shouldn't have been playing in the garden. That's a grandmother response. After settling down and went back outside to play, I decided to climb back into the garden. Probably not the smartest move, but we're just kids at the time. I climbed over the fence at the end of the garden opposite the privacy hedge. I stayed close to the fence for a few seconds, feeling that whatever was there moments earlier was still there. Then I took off running through the center of the garden in a straight line from one end toward the hedge. As I was running, these small dark objects attached to the filament-like line were dropping out of the sky, seemingly trying to hit me. 3 of them in total. The first one missed and fell behind me as I ran, with me laughing and squealing all in the same time as if it were a game. The second one also fell behind me as I made my sprint, as did the third. The objects never touched the ground. They stopped a few inches above the ground and retracted back to whatever they came from. I saw these lines retract when looking back as I ran, all except for the third. The third one missed and fell behind me as I made it to the hedge end of the garden. I immediately turned around and grabbed a hold of the line. I pulled myself off the ground and placed my feet on top of a small dark object attached to the end. I physically held onto this thing with my bare hands and swung it around on it while suspended in midair just a few inches off the ground. I specifically remember it having a little bit of a give, like there was at least some elasticity or bounce to it. I also specifically remember wanting it to retract with me on it because I wanted to see what was on the other end in the sky. Again, there was no visible source. Fortunately, it did not retract. It did move while I was playing on it. It didn't even attempt to shake me off. I just waited until I got bored and retracted immediately after I jumped off. I've never seen these things again after that day. I've never seen anything else like it, and I've never heard of anyone else experiencing anything close to that. It was extraordinarily bizarre. I'll never forget it. Interesting, Boothwyn, PA is approximately 5 miles south of now defunct Granite Run Mall, a mall which was built atop a former granite quarry. The geology of the area encompassing Boothwyn and the surrounding communities is made up of Baltimore gneiss, a type of granitic gneiss, G-N-E-I-S-S. The community is very close to the Delaware River and several smaller waterways. I used to play in a branch of Nauman's Creek, which runs through my grandparents' neighborhood. I couldn't say what, if any, interrelationships there are between the events I experienced and the geology of the area, but I figured if there could be interrelationships, perhaps you'd like to know. Thank you. I reported this case to MUFON around November 2015. Obviously, there wasn't much the investigator could do with a report that came 35 years after the event. The investigator did say that there are no other similar cases that they could find in MUFON's system. Additionally, I had a clinical hypnotherapist session with Michael Brown out of Richmond, Virginia, to see if hypnotic regression could provide any further details. Unfortunately, there was nothing new recovered, but the memories were sharper and even more vivid. I was reluctant to send this because, to be perfectly honest, it's crazy, Mr. Paulides. If this happened to me, if I wasn't the little boy playing with these objects and having my little hands wrapped around it, I couldn't believe it. Not for 1 second. Something is urging me to send it anyway. Thanks for this. Appreciate it. So, back when this happened, we weren't as aware of how to recover DNA as we are today. There's something called touch DNA, meaning if I touch your arm, you could go have a test done on that arm and you could find my DNA on your arm. True. This is true. This is how they identify some murder suspects. Now, let's presume that this thing from the sky was from some very advanced civilization. And what if they wanted your DNA? Well, you touched it, you grabbed it, you were riding it. They pulled it back into their whatever, and they now have your DNA. Or, what if the thing that hit the back of your head wanted just a little infinitesimal piece of your scalp for DNA. They have that. And maybe this was a way to get DNA without abducting you. I don't know. I'm just thinking outside the box. The whole thing, I've read a lot of MUFON reports over the years. I've never heard of anything like this one. And it's original, but there's just enough out there to make me interested. The part about not seeing anything in the sky, there was a story out of Texas years ago where thousands of blackbirds all of a sudden were lining the streets. And they couldn't figure out why they were all dying. But it was almost like a simultaneous event. This wasn't poisoning where some birds die immediately and some birds died hours later. It was like all of a sudden, boom, they're on the ground. Well, they did a cause of death analysis on several of the birds. And it showed that they hit a solid object and died from hitting the object. The theory being is that there was something up in the sky that nobody could see. The birds ran into it, they didn't see it either, and they died from broken necks and things. So the ability of something to be in the sky and us not to see it is real. And what if there was something just above this yard and they saw a young person playing in the yard and they said, well, let's see if we can get some DNA off of that individual. Again, just thinking outside the box. All right, next letter. In response to your last video saying, blah, 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 we felt compelled to write you. As I'm sure you are aware, firefighter Jay Schreckengast was missing in the Natchez, Washington area. So that was a fire chief from the Seattle Fire Department. We mentioned this on the Kitty Ass Sheriff Facebook page in a brief post about our strange occurrence near that area about a month ago from where the chief disappeared. We've had many strange occurrences in different areas around Washington. We arrived at this little spot along the Little Natchez River about an hour and a half before dusk, and we started unloading some gear from our van. My husband said about 30 minutes into unpacking, he heard what sounded like rocks being banged together in succession, maybe 20 times upriver. Then we just went on going about our business, brushing it off. Now, normally we have camps set up about this time with a fire, lanterns, and we have our kiddo with us. This trip, though, we couldn't have a fire due to the burn ban in the Schneider Springs fire that was going on. So we all had a big lantern on top of the van. It's about 10:30 p.m. We were all in bed watching the movie 8 Below. Our kiddo and my husband fell asleep before it was over. I started feeling uneasy about 15 to 20 minutes before the movie ended. Felt like someone was watching me. Once the movie was over, I said, hey, babe, to which the only reply I got was a snore. So I crawled up front as close to the floor of the van as I could to turn off the DVD player. I was still feeling uneasy and I felt watched. I crawled back to bed and reached up ever so carefully to turn the mini battery lantern off to try and get some sleep. I noticed the lantern outside must have run out of propane because I couldn't see anything outside the windows anymore, just plain darkness. So I lay awake, staying still, having this feeling of something was watching us for what appeared like probably an hour before I finally dozed off. The next morning, just as it was barely starting to get light, at about 6:20 a.m., my husband got up to relieve himself. He stepped in front of the van, just like along the river to do so. Right as he finished, he heard what sounded like a grown man yelling, "Ah! Aha!" So he walked 40 feet past the back of the van, trying to hear what direction it was coming from. At that point, he heard another sound on top of the aha that was still going on. It sounded to be raspy, growly gibberish that lasted about 5 seconds. Meanwhile, the other ah sound is continuing, and at that point, he ran back to the back window of the van to bang on it to try to wake me up. I woke up, startled, thinking maybe an animal was right outside, so I sprang open the back door quickly and heard what he was hearing. It sent shivers down my spine. I heard it for about 10 to 15 seconds before it stopped, and we were staring at each other in disbelief. The sound lasted roughly 45 seconds to a minute from start to finish. I was wide awake at this point. We started conversing over what it could possibly be and what in the heck was it and what we should do. So within about an hour, we packed up and headed up the road towards where we thought we heard it coming from, which was the north of the camp location, kind of near the west fork of Bear Creek and Bear Creek Junction. We only saw one vehicle coming down the road with no camping, hunting, or hiking gear that we could see. We looked around a bit and listened, but didn't hear anything. We probably shouldn't have gone to scope it out, but we were curious. After that, we decided to call it a day and get out of there. We still have the conversation to this day about it. So when we saw that Jay, the fire chief, was missing, it was only about 10 to 15 miles away from there, we wrote to the sheriff page about it. A gentleman responded to it stating he's hunted up that way for 20 years and just about a week ago was camped by the 1901 road and had a similar experience. His camp was only about a 13-minute drive away from where we had our experience. I took the conversation private so I could hear more about his experience. He said it was okay for me to send you screenshots of our conversation if I left out his last name. He'd be happy to talk to you if you'd like. Really appreciate your hard work. It made us even more cautious in the woods. We're now even considering both getting personal locator beacons. We are so very sorry for the loss of your son and could never imagine going through what you have. Stay strong. You and your son's work have paid off and continues to do so. Thank you for all you do, and God bless. The woods are a strange place. It's not Disneyland out there. It's not your local neighborhood. And to say that we don't understand what goes on in our world, probably be an understatement. What happened here? Who knows? Something odd. Next letter. Dear Dave, the only thing that comes to mind as of significance of the fish is the proximity of the river, which leads me to several questions for you. Could this fish, if placed there by something, be a type of foreshadowing of his fate? Several weeks ago, I did a video about a young man going to Miami University, and he came back to his room and there was a fish on his bed. He later disappeared that night. Has there been a record of people using side scan sonar or other types of detection equipment underwater in rivers that shows some type of supernatural activity or phenomena we're not familiar with? I've not read of anything other than UFO activity that shows objects leaving and entering water. Finally, I've been meaning to ask you this question for a while, but know you don't want to speculate. What do you think is going on in these missing people? Come on, man. Give me a break. So, unusual things in water. Yes, there's been many unusual things in water. Go to Duckduckgo and ask about USOs, underwater submerged objects, and you'll come up with a whole host of things. Interesting story that I haven't talked much about. This summer, I was on a boat. There were 4 of us. We were fishing. And we were fishing on a river near a large lake. And we had the fish finder on. And 2 of the 4 of us were near the front of the boat, near the steering compartment for the boat, and we're looking at the fish finder. And right when we're looking at it, a very large snake-like creature about 25 feet down goes across the fish finder. I guesstimated it to be, we both talked about it, probably somewhere between 10 and 15 feet, probably a foot thick based on the size of the fish that were scattering from the area. Yeah. I couldn't believe, and neither could my friend believe, what we were looking at. We were stunned. And we were probably, less than a quarter mile from the lake. There's nothing in Montana that could match what we saw, that anyone could acknowledge. And the weird thing was, I'm not somebody that keeps a close eye on fish finders unless we're moving point to point, and we weren't. We were just kind of sitting there, and it was in a a deep hole where there were a lot of fish, big fish. So, yeah, we both saw it. Very, very strange. All right, let's get on with the stories. So, first story is from Alaska, and it's from April 4th, 1961. A woman named Teofilia Perkowski, Polish woman, 80 years old. She lived in a small city called Delta Junction. She lived in the United States for 60 years. And about 18 months earlier, she had moved to Delta Junction to live with her daughter. She lived in New Jersey for most of her life. She still had a Polish accent, but she spoke good English. Well, every morning she got up early. And on this April 4th morning of 61, she got up early again, made herself a cup of coffee, finished it, and then went out to feed the chickens. Now, what I think about right then is that they must have had one heck of a compound and fencing structure that was super strong around those chickens, because Alaska has some big bears. And when those bears get hungry, they'll come eat your chickens. So that's the first thing I thought of. Wow, Teofilia is going out there to feed them. They must be well protected. So anyhow, in 61, this area of Delta Junction, south of Fairbanks, pretty rural area. Her daughter said that in recent months, she had started to act confused, not normal. And on this morning, the daughter said she always tried to give her a little room to let her be herself. She liked to hike around the property, go into the woods. But she went out of the house wearing a long bathrobe and some head swath to keep her head warm. And by 8:30, she hadn't come in. So the daughter went out, started looking around, couldn't find her. Got a neighbor to help, and the neighbor started to look. Their house was about 1,900 feet from the Richardson Highway in Delta Junction. And the Richardson Highway is the main road going to Fairbanks. I've been to this area. It gets remote quick even today. So within a couple hours, there were hundreds of locals that came to the property and started looking. Well, within 24 hours, they had 4 canine teams there, helicopters, ATVs, equestrians, and the first dog teams there tracked her scent from the area of the chicken coop to the Richardson Highway. But nobody thought that anybody would pick up an 80-year-old lady in a bathrobe and some protection around her head. So they centered for 4 days on that area around the property. Well, Mrs. Perkowski was known throughout this area of Alaska. She was almost like a personality. And the newspapers covered this heavy, really heavy. I mean, the second day she was missing, she was on the front page of the newspapers. Well, a husband and wife saw the newspaper the second day she was missing and said, "Hey, we picked up that lady on the morning of April 4th at about 7:30. Let's call the police." So they called the police, called the Alaska State Troopers, and they said, yeah, we picked her up, what turned out to be in front of her house, and they drove her 5 miles north. And then that's where she asked to get out by some other homes. So she got out there. Well, now the state troopers have a place to look. So they put the dogs all over that trail where she was let out. And the dogs couldn't pick up a scent. Dogs walked a few feet, came back, nothing. So they put planes up. And then they got local military people to come and help, 200 of them. And again, it was huge press. So This is the map. And this is where her residence was, in Delta Junction. And this is the Tanana River. Big river runs through right on and near the highway and the residence. She goes 5 miles north, and it's about 5 miles from Delta Junction to Big Delta. And that's where the area she was dropped off around some residences. There's Fairbanks up here. Now, this area going into this direction is very thick with woods. They couldn't have gone this direction because of the river. So they knew that they could concentrate on this area. A couple of things to remember. The dogs did their job. And that's what was impressive here. When the Alaska State Troopers bring their dogs out and they tracked Mrs. Perkowski from the residence or from the chicken coop to the highway, they did the right thing. They did the good job. But then when they get to her next stop and they can't pick up a scent, that's odd. It's not right. That's weird. And to think somebody 80 years old, where can they go? There was snow on the ground. And they thought, well, maybe when the snow melts in the spring and the fall, they'll be able to find her. They never did. But snow offers the opportunity to track, and there were none. And there were a lot of homes around this area. So if she had died, her odor would have been picked up and they'd smell it. And to think it's been, 60 years, she hasn't been found? What happened to her? How far can an 80-year-old woman go? And why didn't the canines pick up the scent? The case was a good example to me of the canines doing their job, and then the canines for some reason have the inability to do their job. One of the few times that it was proven that they do work. So sometimes you learn a lot from incidents where people are found. And in this incident, I don't know if we learn a lot, but it's revealing. Maria Hendrika, she was 38 years old on July 1st, 1959, and she's with her family in Yosemite National Park. And she's with her 3 kids, 8, 6, and 3. And it was July 1st, 59. She had moved to the U.S. in 1954 from Holland. She was from a little town called Byron, California, up in Northern California. And they were staying at the Big Trees Lodge. And they'd been there a couple days, and they'd gone behind the lodge and just piddled around hiking on some trails, but they were going out on a bigger hike on the 1st. Well, as they were out going around, they were around the big trees of Yosemite in an area called Mariposa Grove. And they were behind this location when she said, hey, I'm just going to go up the hill just a bit and take some more pictures, uphill. Husband says, okay. Her husband's name was Otto. So they wait, kids wait, dad waits, wait. She doesn't come back. This was at about 3 p.m. And what time is the optimal time to disappear? 4 p.m. But really any time between 3 and 5. So they make it back to the lodge, they report her missing, and National Park Rangers respond, sheriff responds, and they request bloodhounds, trackers, and Castle Air Force Base soldiers. So this is the Big Trees area. The lodge, Big Tree Lodge, is located right in Wawona. And they were hiking this area back in here. Now, the Merced River flows right through here and gets a little desolate right in this location. But everybody who stays in a lodge looks at the water, knows which location, which direction the water flows, which is a key point. Why? Because if you're downstream, you know you can walk upstream back to your lodge. If you're up here, you know you can walk downstream to the lodge. Keep that thought in mind. So they're searching, they're not finding anything. The searchers are about ready to give up. And then a church group came in to offer their services. And one man that was a custodian had searched for people before. And he's down by the Merced River. 114 hours after she disappeared, son of a gun, he sees Maria waving her arms. She comes up, gives him a big hug. She's got scratches over her body. And he asks her if she's okay. And she goes, well, I'm a little cold. It got down to 38 degrees at night. I've been eating gooseberries. And he asked her, what happened? How'd you get lost? She goes, I don't know. I don't have any idea. I don't remember much. But I'm grateful I'm here. Okay. So she was missing 4 days plus 16 hours. Taken back to the lodge. She was okay. She had a lot of water. She had the river. And she had gooseberries. Son of a gun, huh? So, doesn't have a memory about what happened. Eating berries. Found next to water. Loss of memory. Point of separation. Something happened when she stepped away from her family and went uphill. 4 canine teams were at that location and tried to track her, couldn't. And in fact, they had a professional tracker that was part of the canine teams that couldn't follow her. Very strange. Very strange. It's unusual to have somebody missing for 4 days and to have them be okay, especially when temperatures were in the 30s. And she was dressed just in shorts and a small shirt. Weird. So, the next case involves a location that I know very well in the state of Minnesota. So, when Ben was coming up through hockey, I, as a parent, knew that he had some special skills. He was just a great athlete. And I knew that to get him to that next level, you weren't going to be able to stay in San Jose for your summer. You'd have to compete with the best athletes in the world somewhere and really gauge your own talent against them and see how far you have to get to that top bar. So some San Jose Sharks players told me that the best place to go was a place called Minnesota Hockey Camp. Minnesota Hockey Camp, owned by the Grillo family. And the place is great. Took Ben there when he was young. I stayed with him for that week. And every day they'd get up at 6:30, have a great breakfast, and go out and have an hour and a half ice time in the morning, come back, do dry land training, eat a big lunch, go back in the afternoon, an hour and a half more of ice training, come back at night, more dry land, and huge dinner. And what you had there was the best hockey players from around the world. They had a ton of NHL players that came there just to train in the off season. True story. And so you were blocked with people that were in your own age bracket. And it was in Minnesota, northern Minnesota. A lot of hunting, fishing, outdoors, water skiing. It was a great, great place. And Chuck Grillo used to be the general manager for the Sharks when they first started. And as the years went by, Ben asked to go for more and more weeks as he got older because he knew the benefit he was getting out of being there. And the parents could come and watch the ice time, but you couldn't be around the camp most of the other times. I distinctly remember Ben was 17 and he was stuck in a group of college players, and he was a junior in high school. And he was with these guys that were at the top colleges in the US. He was playing defense with them. And Mr. Grillo came up next to me and goes, "Hey, you're Dave." I go, "Yeah." "Nicest man you ever want to meet." Him and his wife ran the camp. He sat down and he talked to me for, I don't know, an hour. He said, "Your son's a good player. He's going to make it. He's got something in his heart." At the time, coming from someone like Mr. Grillo, it meant a lot. Because he scouted players all the time. And he asked me, he said, "Do you want your son to play in college, or do you want him to go play major juniors?" Where major juniors is usually up in Canada, and players get paid, and really that's the fastest roadmap to the NHL. And Ben and I had talked about this a lot. And he said, "No, Dad, I want to go play in college, but I want to play at a top tier college." I told this to Mr. Grillo, and he goes, "It's going to happen, Dave. It's going to happen. He just has to go play in the USHL a year or two, and he's going to get picked up." And it was a couple years after that Ben went to the USHL and played in Youngstown, Ohio. And then he got picked up by Miami University, which was the #1 team in the nation at that time. It's unbelievable. But, so I'm in Minnesota, and I had written a couple books, and some people knew who I was, and they said, "Dave, you got to go up to northern Minnesota, even further north. And there's a couple of Native American reservations up there, and they've had everything up there. They've had UFOs, Bigfoot, ghosts. They have everything up there, Dave, and it's very strange. And it's great fishing." I thought, wow, it's great. I got to go. So a couple of days, when I got up early, Ben went to camp, I just took off, drove north, and I went into these areas I'm going to talk to you about. So, first place I'm going to talk to you about is an area north of Bemidji, about 60 miles from the Canadian border. And on November 22nd, 2006, at about 9:30 to 9:50 in the morning, on this Native American reservation, 2 boys, Tristan White, 4, and Avery Stateley, 2, brothers, were playing in the front yard. Their mom comes out after about 15 minutes, can't find either one. And she was concerned because Tristan took daily meds. Never said what the condition was, but he needed them to survive. Well, she couldn't find the boys, so she calls tribal police, and they're on the scene within 20 minutes. And they bring canines and planes, and within hours, 200 people from the community are looking. And I'll give you the location here. This is Lower Red Lake, Red Lake's Indian Reservation. Their residence was right here, just kind of southeast of Thunder Lake. And this area is very thick and full of lush forest. Now the area was still frozen. And the first people on scene are looking through all of the grasses that if they would have been stepped on, they would have gone down. They weren't seeing anything around the house as though the boys had made a track through it. It was still cold, like I said. Well, on November 23rd, they had already called for divers to go into the lakes to search for the boys, because there were several lakes nearby. And the divers first checked the lakes with sonar and then went in and they put actually people in the water. None of the ice was broken on the lakes. There was no evidence of abduction. Nobody saw any strange cars. Nobody saw any trails or tracks. There was no evidence of any animal predation, which there are bears and things out there. And there's no evidence anybody fell through the ice to get in the lakes. And they were stymied. At the end of the second day, I guess who shows up? That's right, the FBI. Well, on November 28th, the Star Tribune in Minnesota said that there's no evidence the boys are in any of the lakes. So now everyone's talking as though they were abducted. Well, after 5 days, they have no evidence. There's no tracks leaving the scene. Canines aren't picking up any scent trail leaving the residence. Water sonar, divers hadn't picked up anything. 2 airplanes saw nothing. The people in the residences in the general area had heard nothing. What happened? The FBI was highly concerned, and their special agent in charge of the area said they had no idea. They were at an absolute roadblock as to what happened. So, on April 1st, 2007, a half a mile from the house, in this small body of water, the actual closest body of water to the house, which had been searched intensely by divers and sonar, they put new bloodhounds back in, searching that area, and in 6 to 10 feet of water, they found both boys, and I'll use the wording, encased in ice. And they were near a beaver lodge. That's like a beaver dam or a beaver house in the water. And the coroner later determined that they both drowned. Since we're talking about hockey, let me use a hockey analogy. And since I coached hockey for years, I've used the same story many times. So, let's say I'm talking to my team, and my team, I want them to score at this goal. And as we're down here trying to score on this goal, we turn the puck over. And their defenseman gets the puck and makes an outlet pass to one of their wings. Now, we've got defensemen and we've got other wings trying to stop the puck from moving up the ice. That's number one. They make another pass and it goes up to another wing. So they got it past our wing defenseman. And now we go over and we try to stop them over here, and that doesn't work. Now that wing centers it up to a defenseman who carries the puck up the ice towards our goal that we're defending. And we got our goalie there, and we've got 2 other defensemen here. And they're trying to block him, and they get around one defenseman, and our other defenseman tries to block him, and they get around him, and then it's one-on-one with the goalie, and they get the puck past the goalie. How many things had to happen? How many things had to fail for that team to score on us? So let's think about that analogy for a second. How many things had to fail for Tristan and Avery to be found in that body of water? First of all, there's no scent trail leaving the house. There's no tracks leading to the body of water. There's no broken ice. You put divers in the water, they don't find them. You put sonar in the water, that doesn't find them. So you take all of these things together and you think, well, here's what I want you to think about. This is Tristan and Avery, okay? Two great looking boys. So no tracks to the water. Bloodhounds, no scent trail. No breaks in the ice. Water sonar shows nothing, and divers find nothing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Could all 5 of those things have happened and they missed their bodies? What does common sense tell you? I'm sorry, folks, I don't think so. I don't buy it. I'm not buying this at all. Now, we know that Tristan took medication, so he had some kind of disability. So when you start to look at it all, no tracks, no scent trail, in water, drowning, disability with meds. By the way, this is a cluster zone of missing people. What happened to these boys? When I first saw it, it made me sick, number one. The 2 young, good-looking Native American boys passed. There had to be something more to this. It was a case that matches so much of what we do, coupled with the FBI being there, and there was already a statement that there was no evidence of abduction, so there's no crime. I don't know. So, Maria Hendrika, again from Holland, missing in Yosemite, July 1st, 59. Teofilia Perkowski, 80 years old, missing from Delta Junction, Alaska, never found. Tristan White and Avery Stateley, missing northern Minnesota. Strange case. Coupled with what I know about that area and the number of people that I've researched and documented from that area, very strange. So, hope I've given you a little more of an education as to how these things come around and the reality of how searches work and how canines can be successful and why I put so much trust in them. If you like the video, please give me a thumbs up. Please put this on your social media. And as I've stated before, I'm very interested in hearing from hunters out there especially. Also, thank you to several park rangers for writing in with your stories. And I'm interested in hearing from rangers and people that have worked in the woods, sheriffs. Greatly appreciated. In the meantime, hopefully I'll be back. Again, I don't know, YouTube is researching me, investigating me for something that they won't tell me, but whatever. I'm here for now. If something happens, my website, canammissing, like CanadianAmericanMissing.com. Follow me on Twitter, David Paulides at canammissing. And I'm on Facebook too, Missing 411. I appreciate each of you being here. And I know that this mental health issue is huge, and someday the press will start to talk about it, and it'll be revealed that the real tragedy of all of this pandemic is many of our great young people that have taken their lives. Thanks for being here.